Hi, families. My name is Heather Martinson. I run Celebration Education, which is a learning program here in Southern California. I just a little bit about myself. I started homeschooling back in the 90s. I knew before my oldest was born that I would be homeschooling my children. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about things that you can learn from homeschoolers and what public school families can learn from the homeschool movement. And I'll share with you a little bit about what I learned along the way in my own homeschool journey. First of all, I want to share with you something interesting about people like Abraham Lincoln, Abigail Adams, Claude Monet, Florence Nightingale. These are people who were not educated in a traditional way, not sitting in a classroom way like most of the kids are today. Instead, their parents, when they're growing up, allowed them to learn in different ways, or they didn't have access to education, one thing or another. These people, when I was growing up, I remember in school being taught that for Abraham Lincoln, it's amazing what he was able to accomplish in his lifetime, despite the fact that he had little to no formal education. Thomas Edison and Winston Churchill, all these people. I mean, there's lists and lists and lists of people who grew up outside a traditional classroom. What I've learned actually is that maybe these people became great because they learned outside of a traditional classroom. A traditional classroom does not accommodate the learner as well as good as it can be in a different situation. So sometimes getting away from school is the best thing that can happen to a great mind. So if that's you, that's your child, this is an excellent opportunity for you to make the most out of the situation. So it's been thought that a good education is if your child learns to do what all the other kids are doing. But the truth is, when it comes down to it, is a more powerful approach is if you help your child find their own uniqueness and then expand on what's unique about them, their own personal genius. And then they have the opportunity to be their best, to find their and expand on their greatness. That's what I've learned about homeschooling, is that each child has something unique and wonderful about them. So considering education today, back in 1910, back in 1910, transportation was horse and buggy. Today, transportation is cars and airplanes. Back in 1842, it was printing press was primary form of communication. Today, we have computers, tablets, phones. Back in 1897, a classroom was a box full of desks, and it hasn't changed. We have so much more available to us today that we're limiting ourselves by keeping our children crowded in boxes. There's just so much more to life. So, but yet at the same time, the homeschool movement has been growing. One interesting thing about homeschooling is that every home is an experiment. As each family tries to find and do what's best for their individual children, schoolers, a lot of them are not afraid to try something new. And so every home becomes like a little petri dish or an experiment, and we get to try new things. If something's not working, we don't have to wait for a government far away to change something for us. We can decide, you know what, I want to try this. And you can drop what you're doing, you can close down, retool, and be up and running the next day with a whole new program. That's an advantage that homeschoolers have had. And they've had the opportunity to experiment with a lot of different things and find things that work. And that's what I've done a lot too. So I'm going to share with you, I think it's about 9 lessons that public school families can learn from homeschoolers. First lesson I'm going to share with you is that forcing kids to learn does not mean that they're actually learning. If you're struggling with your kids right now at home, if there are certain lessons that the teacher says that they're supposed to be getting done, and you're saying, okay, you have to sit at the kitchen table until these things are done, you might be missing out on opportunities for them to actually learn. Children actually are natural learners. They like to learn. If they're just given force-fed, boring worksheet type thing, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be interesting. It's going to be getting in the way of their exploring and learning in other ways. What I've learned through homeschooling is that when you give children a lot of options, a lot of different approaches, different things to try and do, that they are better off. So instead of a one size fits all worksheet, you can offer your children a whole smorgasbord of learning opportunities. Let them pick and choose the things that are most delicious to them, because learning does feel good. Then they're really good at choosing what's just right for them. They don't like the stuff that's too easy because it's boring, it's baby work. They like things that are new, things that are just at the edge of their learning experience, things that are just right, ready for. And of course, they're not going to choose something that's too hard. They're really good at choosing the materials that are just right for them. So help your child choose what they get to do for school. Additionally, they will often choose things that are of great interest to themselves. Interesting equals learning. So if they're interested in a subject, let them run with it. Let them learn as much as they want in that particular subject. And it's okay if other things are put on the shelf for a while. But this is how they're going to have most meaningful experiences. Lesson number 2 is don't limit their learning time. I think one of the things that a lot of families are learning right now is they're surprised at how little bit of time it takes for them to actually do schoolwork. That families are noticing that it's only 2 to 3 hours a day that they're spending schoolwork and they get everything done. That's not unusual. It doesn't take forever to learn things and to get good learning in. So, however, what I'm trying to say though is that don't limit their time, because if a child wants to learn something, there's no reason to stop them. So, if you're giving your child a worksheet and telling them in schools, they'll say, okay, you've got 10 minutes to do this worksheet, they will rush through it as best they can and then turn it in and forget about it. But if it's a subject that a child is really interested in, you don't have to limit them. They can learn for as long as they like. Let them explore, investigate a subject for however long until they're satisfied. Friend who she was in their homeschool, they were learning about caves, and her children decided to turn their bathroom into a cave. And so they put up stalactites and stalagmites and bats and bugs, and the whole bathroom was this dark cave where they learned about all these different creatures and things inside a cave, and it was an immersive experience. But the bathroom was a cave for a couple weeks. That is so much more enriching than a worksheet, and the child is going to remember those experiences. Now, lesson number 3 is school subjects do not need to be divided up. Imagine eating a cake, one ingredient at a time. It's bland, it's icky, we don't even want it. However, if you pull all the school subjects together, it becomes a really yummy experience. So imagine if your child's interested in dinosaurs, all the school subjects can be covered through this one topic. Obviously, paleontology is a science. You can read and write about dinosaurs. You can measure dinosaur sizes, make dinosaur timelines. You can chart which continents have found the most dinosaurs and graph the percentages. There's tons of math just in dinosaurs. Then, of course, you can study what civilizations throughout time have thought about dinosaurs. There's just so many things areas you can go into with a single subject, and you can do this with virtually any subject. Lesson number 4 is that there's more to school than 3 R's. The schools mostly test and measure reading, writing, and math. And that's because you can't measure creativity. You can't measure how well a person is at interacting with other people. These are not measurable things, but yet these other skills are just as important. So if your child is musically inclined, if they are physically inclined, if they are in tune with nature, there are many other ways, as Howard Gardner called them, intelligences that can increase your child's knowledge and well-being, and things that can also help your child do well in life. And it's not always just the 3 R's. We need to respect these other intelligences as well and give space for them and recognize and appreciate them. Lesson number 5, you don't have to sit to learn. Truth is, people need to move. When you're sitting for a long time, your brain starts to slow down and shut down, and the learning opportunities actually become harder if you're not moving. And I'm saying you because this is everyone. This is how our brains work. But children in particular, they need to move. They're made to move. So this is why hands-on learning is so much more effective. If you were just to give a child a reading assignment and they read about something, like say if they were to read this paragraph, these are spiny, hard-skinned animals that live on the rocky sea floor. These invertebrates are not fish, they're echinoderms. They move very slowly along the seabed using hundreds of tiny tube feet. This is describing a sea star, but a child reading this paragraph would not know what it was at all. We all have an image of a sea star in our mind, but without having a picture of a real thing, it's not as effective. So words alone are not good enough. Pictures are even better. Pictures can provide graphs, which provide information, even more information. Even better than having a picture of a thing is having the real thing. You can have a sea star that you can touch, turn over, and look at, and experience, feel the rough. You can buy these at craft stores. I have some sea star, really just the carcass anymore, but it's something they can experience right at home. Even better than that is if you could have a more immersive experience. For example, if you were to go to the ocean and see a sea star in its natural habitat, then you've got all your senses involved in the learning experience. It's become a more profound experience. They're learning and asking questions. These are the things that while they're asking questions, they're going to be learning even more because they want to know. It's so exciting. And then they go home and they're like, did you know that? And guess what I saw? And you know what happened? And they can't wait to tell you all the things they learned, because that's what happens when you take them to see the thing in real life. And of course, that's just going to lead back to the books a lot of times, or online, where you're going to be searching more information and trying to find out more about the subject. Again, this is because we're not limiting the time, right? We don't need to stop them from learning. Okay, lesson number 5. We don't need no stinking tests. Okay, so when you're working one-on-one with a child, you know what they know. There's not a reason to test them. As a matter of fact, most traditional tests are poor assessment tools. Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives teaches us that knowledge and comprehension is most tests are based on. Can you recall this thing and write it down, or just fill in the bubble? And that's very, very superficial. When we want to dive down deeper into learning experiences, we're going to do things like apply information, analyze information, synthesize the information into something else, or use it in a new setting. Or we're even going to evaluate whether this information is good enough. Should I even bother with it? These types of experiences are far more valuable than just plain returning information to the teacher. So, and that's when the assessment itself is a learning experience. So give your children lots of time to show their work in the form of projects and activities, cutting things, dissecting things, creating things, making a poster. It's all more immersive and interesting and memorable than filling in worksheets. So unfortunately, these types of experiences are more difficult to quantify. That's why people want to test. But if you know what your child is doing, and you know that they understand the content was intended, then you're good. You don't need to test them. You're talking to them right now. Lesson number 6 is that standards disrespect the learner and the learning process. It's a myth that high standards means no child is left behind. The truth is, there is no such thing as a standard child. Even if there was one, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want that child to be yours. Standards are there to attempt to make sure that all children perform according to those standards. But truth is, standards, no matter how high you make them, are really just simply a compilation of information that the average child should be able to learn at a given age. So personally, I don't want my children to be average. I'm not interested in a standardized child or a common child. Rather than making sure that my child does not fall behind, I want my child to be their own personal best. I don't want to spend all my time working with my child to make sure they keep up, but I want to find what my child is good at and help them go forward. move forward and become their best. I believe that every child has their own abilities, and that the more time you spend helping them catch up, the less time they have to become their unique self. Not only that, but when they are their unique self, they have better abilities in order to help and work through those areas that they would otherwise fall behind in. You may be familiar with the fable called Animal School, a fable by George Rebus. You can look it up later, but the basic thing is that all animals got together and they were going to form a school. So the curriculum was climbing, swimming, and flying. The duck was really good at swimming, better than the instructor, but he didn't do very well in flying. He was passing grades, and he was poor in running. So he had to stay after school and drop swimming in order to practice running. And of course, that just made his webbed feet get torn up and bad, and he became actually bad at swimming. But then he was average, and that's exactly what they wanted, was average, that everyone was able to pass the certain standard, right? Of course, there's several other animals that they talked about, and by the end of the year, there was an abnormal eel that could swim exceedingly well and also run, climb, and fly a little, had the highest average, and was valedictorian. Of course, the eagle, he was a problem child, and he was disciplined because in the climbing class, he beat all the others to the top of the tree because he used his own way to get there. So the standards are what's holding your children back. And the idea that you want to make sure that your children don't fall behind is holding your children back. I know this is a big leap for a lot of people, but it's an important one. And when you can get to the point where you say, I don't care if my child is falling behind in math, or I don't care if they're dyslexic and they're not reading up to grade level right now, that is when it's like golden, because that's when you can work within the things that your children are good at and help them find that value within themselves, that they know that they are not stupid, that they know they have good things and things that contribute and help make. It's amazing. It's like magic once you release yourself from the state standards. All right, so next, lesson number 7. You don't need to threaten or reward your children to make them learn. Threatening your children is using fear as a motivator, and fear is not a good motivator. Fear is like, if you don't get this done, you don't get to go on, get to go on the tablet, or if you don't get this done, you're going to have to work through dinner. Whatever you use as threats is not a good motivator. Matter of fact, it can be debilitating for many children. They feel threatened, then they don't use their higher brain, they use their fight or flight reflex. It's not helpful to the child when they're supposed to be using the upper thinking in their higher brain. A better motivator than fear is hope. If you promise that if you get this done, I'll give you a treat, or if you get this done, we'll go for a walk. This is nice. It's better. It's a positive thing. However, even that, some children feel it's a threat because they don't get the thing if they don't finish it. But even then, both threat and hope are extrinsic motivators. They are things that are coming from outside of them to help push them forward. And I recognize that these things work. Sometimes it's what you need to do to help them do their chores or whatever that needs to be done. But they're still not as good as a third and final motivator, which is completely intrinsic, without you having to threat or promise, but that the children learn because they like to learn. This is the best motivator. The brain is a self-congratulator. That means we feel good when we're learning things, when we feel good when we accomplish things. We want to help our children get to the point where they are having those successes on their own without our interference with the motivation or the threat. Information that they learn in the classroom, it can be forgotten, but self-motivation is a lifelong skill that can apply to success in all areas of life, including education as they continue to grow older, because they will drive themselves to know more. It's very important. Lesson number 8. Children can learn without credentialed teachers. I'm sure you're learning this about now. Children are constantly learning. We can actually hardly stop them because they naturally learn through their own experiences. They learn to speak English from you. It's an immersion program, right? You speak English and they learn English. So what's interesting is learning to read can be just as easy as speaking English. It is our language in printed format. If they never see the printed format, they can't learn it. But if you're reading to your child every day and you're pointing to the words and you're sounding out the words, if you're modeling for them just like you did when you spoke to them as they're learning to speak, they will learn to read. You really can't hold them back. Also, credential teachers are designed for a large group of children learning the same thing all at the same time. They don't have the time to give individualized attention to your children like you can. So when you are working with your children, they get one-on-one attention, and it's far more valuable than whatever degrees and credentials that child's teacher might have. So a couple other ways that children can learn is from peers. When children collaborate, when they have the opportunity to be in a setting where they're working with 2 or 3 other kids and they discuss and learn amongst each other, they can learn a lot. And if you have a chance to look up Sugatra Mitra, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, Sugata Mitra. It was an experiment in India. There's a TED Talk on this, where they put a computer out for children to explore, and they taught themselves computing, and they taught themselves English. They taught themselves many things just because it was there. So they can learn on their own. They can learn from their peers, and there's many ways that children can learn. Okay, final lesson. Lesson number 9 is that learning is the excitement of the hunt. So my children were in school for a year and a half while I was working full time, and they were close enough in age that they were put in a combination class. So on their very first day of school, the teacher announced to them that she's going to be nice today and she's not going to give homework on their first day of school. So basically, what my children learned on their very first day in school is that learning is bad. The teacher was nice and so didn't give them homework. And I was like brokenhearted because my children had enjoyed learning and knew that learning was good and fun and interesting. And then the teacher in one day taught them learning is bad. So in my opinion, if you're not having fun in your learning, you're missing out. When children are enjoying themselves and they're learning, they're in a prime position to learn. The emotion is a gatekeeper to learning. When you feel good, you learn better. It's easy. And having fun ensures that there's increased interest and the information is more memorable. So like one thing that we do in celebration education, I mean, just like theme parks, you go to a theme park or a theme restaurant and you immerse yourself in the theme. It becomes interesting and fun, and you just love being part of it. We use themes for our school. So then all of our school subjects each week is a different topic that we integrate all the school subjects into. It just makes it like a theme park of learning, and it's so fun, and their interest is heightened. If anyone wants to know more about learning through themes, feel free to reach out to me because we've been doing it this way for 17 years. Anyway, so when learning and fun are synonymous, children come to really love learning, even the hard stuff. My son, who is dyslexic, he really struggled with reading somewhat, but more writing. But he was the kid of mine who got into reading in high school because he chose it. Very difficult novels. He was, what's his name? Steinbeck. Yes, he was into Steinbeck. I wouldn't read it, but he liked reading Steinbeck in his teen years. And Michelangelo, when he was 15, there was a time when he was working on a sculpture and he was invited by a friend to go on a hunt. Michelangelo turned him down because he was working on this thing. And everyone, and his friend was like, come on, everybody's going, you gotta come. And he's like, you know what? For me, marble has the excitement of the hunt. So Michelangelo would rather work than play. And I have seen that in my own kids as well, that they get so involved in something that they're researching and wanting to know about and creating and building and it just becomes this experience where this is good, this is fun, this is what they want to do. So it's time to set your children free and let them learn. So, I know that most schools are nowhere near um, capable of making drastic changes like the ones I just talked about. But the rules are about to change. In this day and age, we're learning faster and faster and faster what it means for a person to be learning. And perhaps more and more families are going to discover that they really actually don't want their child to be sitting in a classroom full of 30 people, 30 other kids anymore. I'm hoping that more and more families will choose alternative learning environments for their own children, that they will give their children the opportunity to be those a great person. They don't have to be famous, but to be their best selves. So we don't have to wait around for someday when the government decides that things will be different, but we can make a difference in our lives for our children today, because the future of education has already begun, and it is so exciting. So who's ready to make a difference for a child today? I look forward to talking to you. If you want to reach out to me, Heather at celebrationeducation.com. I'll talk to you later.